Welcome to the 5th episode of the Monthly Dirtcast. I'm Jared Dillian, editor and publisher of the Daily Dirt Nap, a financial newsletter for investment professionals. I'm going to skip all the small talk this time and get right into it. We have a fascinating guest this month who took a couple scoops of pre-workout before the interview. Actually, I did too. And I should mention that I've been trying to get all my guests to take pre-workout before we do the podcast, and this is the first guest who has agreed. But we have a fascinating guest this month to talk about a part of the business world that I'm sure you've never thought about before. It's a corner of the market that's had slow, steady returns for years, and now some big players are starting to get interested. In fact, it's a roaring bull market, and this bull market is probably going to get even bigger. Are you curious as to what this is? Any guesses? We're talking about dental practices. My guess is Chris Vandiford, who is what you call a practice broker or transition manager. He helps dentists buy and sell dental practices or sometimes merges them. This sort of thing happens all the time. There's a dentist who is retiring, who wants to get liquidity, and a younger dentist coming out of school is looking for a practice to take over. Chris arranges the transaction and extracts a fee. This all sounds fairly straightforward, but there is a lot to know about this business, and it's not easy to break into. Chris, welcome to the show.
Jared, good to be here.
How's the Yeah Buddy treating you?
I feel great.
It's starting to kick in.
I'm high energy today. I'm ready to go.
I'm feeling the skin tingle. We started out, so he introduced me to Finaflex, which I would take before TV and radio interviews, and now I'm on to Yeah Buddy. So did you get this? Did you get it in GNC or Vitamin Shop?
It's definitely over the counter, but it's it was my proprietary secret up till now.
Secret's out. Yeah, buddy. Okay. So how long have you been doing this?
I've been in the dental world for about 16, 17 years, 2000 to 2001.
And how did you get started?
I moved to Ohio, of all places, if you can imagine, a cornfield, to learn about the dental business, which I believe is one of the best areas to learn about the dental industry is in the Midwest. Just solid, down-to-earth business. And had a mentor who taught me contract work, tax, law, all the different aspects. It took a few years, but once I built up a clientele and transitioned several dozen practices, and it began to roll.
Now, being a broker is being a salesman. And if you're a salesman, this is a relationship business. So it takes a long time to build these relationships, right?
You know, my business really didn't start taking off till 3, 4, 5 years into it because people began to know me. They really bought me, believed me, trusted me, and that takes quite a while to develop.
Yeah, that's a really long on-ramp.
It is. And so it is. If you think about these dentists, they've spent their entire life building a business based on relationships. It would make sense that when they transition, it needs to be very relational. And so it takes a while to develop that.
So you live and work in Ohio, and you do business in Ohio and Kentucky, right?
Most of my business in Ohio, Kentucky, Michigan is very strong. Indiana is very strong. We'll dabble into Pennsylvania a little bit, but with all the dental schools and 6,000 dentists in Ohio, 6,000 in Michigan, 3,000 in Kentucky, there's more than I can handle.
So really you would say it took you 4 or 5 years to start to get some traction.
No question.
Into this, yeah. But the timing wasn't ideal because, you said you started in 2001, 2002, and 5 years later it's 2006, 2007, and then you had the financial crisis. And that affected you a lot.
Well, we were just hitting our stride. I was really developing momentum in the business. And then many of my clients would call me and say, Chris, I was thinking about retiring, but my 401k just took a hit, several thousand, maybe 7 figures. And I've got to work several years to build that back up. I cannot retire right now. So we need to put my transaction on hold. Or I actually had a couple of large national lending banks that either closed the purse strings or went out of the lending business for dental acquisitions altogether. So the market definitely changed on a dime for about 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna talk about this in a little more detail, but a lot of people don't understand this, but dentistry is an economically cyclical business. When we're in a recession, people postpone dental work. The dental business actually suffers. And as you mentioned, from the transition standpoint, people took hits to their retirement savings, so couldn't retire. And we're going to talk about financing, but there's the door closes on financing, and you can't get deals done.
It was really a perfect storm. So anyone in that type of brokering business, it filtered out those who could not ride the wave. The good news is that a strong practice will weather those economic storms. And so there are dentists who have amazing businesses with thousands of patients. And you would think that the economy suffered and the stock market was an issue, but they were still making money, believe it or not, even during the downturn. And so I think a dental practice, as you said, it's really an amazing vehicle to weather an economic storm, even during something like that.
Yeah. Now, when you first started, in addition to developing relationships, you probably had to learn a lot about just the business aspect. You probably had to learn about, the actual medical procedures and what the work that dentists do, but also how the business is run, how records are kept, how payroll is done, information systems. You had to know everything about the business.
It's an amazing thing. I have dozens of friends in the business, very close friends, travel with them, I've watched their families grow up, I've helped people retire, very close. But I can say, having said that, I can tell you that dentistry, you can be absolutely no knowledge of business, not even understand how a checking account works, and you can make money and do well. It is the most forgiving business I have ever seen. So you have these very smart clinicians come out of school. They have no business sense whatsoever. They could be the worst manager, the worst chairside personality, and still make $250,000, $300,000 a year without question. It's a very, very forgiving business. But to be able to work with these dentists and to be able to understand their business, you have to understand contracts perfectly. You have to be able to speak that language with the attorneys. You have to know tax law and taxes as well as a CPA or better. And you have to understand the procedures so you know how the management works. Most dentists are not good managers. If they were...
So let's talk about that for a second. So that's kind of where you come in, because in addition to M&A and buying and selling practices, you're also sort of a consultant in a lot of ways.
I am.
But if you graduate from dental school, probably you don't have any business experience. You don't know how to run a business. And most dentists, they come out of school and they become sole proprietors, and they have to figure out how to start and run a business. And all they really know how to do is take care of teeth, right?
No question. I find I have actually walked into a dental office and I've had a dentist sit me down, and he closes the door. And he said, Chris, I'm about to tell you something I've never told even my wife. He goes, get me out. I don't know how to run this. I'm surrounded by a group of staff that hate each other. I'm not making any money. I want out. And once you look at their financials, this specific individual who's a good friend of mine now, once I looked at his financials, I said, Jim, you've got everything here to be very successful. You just don't know how to manage it. And introducing him to the right people to help him manage it, he's now very, very successful. But that is not uncommon for the average dentist.
And that's where your consultant role sort of comes in, because you can come into a practice that is sort of underperforming and turn it around. And if that individual wants to sell that practice 5, 10, 15 years in the future, it's a lot more valuable.
Incredibly. What typically dentists come out of school is they're very good at analyzing everything under a microscope. They're outstanding at it. They spend their whole life investigating things and correcting things under a microscope, but that's how they see life a little bit like that too. They miss the big picture. So It's definitely an opportunity for me to come in and sit them down and say, let's go over some metrics and let me show you how to be successful. I pay my bills by selling practices, doing partnerships, mergers, but that doesn't mean this practice requires that. Let me teach you how this works.
So, so you get a fee for a transaction, but do you have any other sources of income?
I do. I do all sorts of varieties of transactions. You know, selling a practice is just an ancillary byproduct of what I do. Sometimes I do management. Sometimes we do partnerships. Sometimes we do mergers. Sometimes a dentist says, I'm really not interested in any of that. I just want a straight out sale. Sometimes we do present value and future value. There's all these tools we can use to help the dentist get to where he wants to go. So I never know really what I'm going to do until I sit down with them and look at their financials and find out what they're trying to accomplish.
So let's talk about valuation. So if you're going to sell a practice, you have to learn how to value the practice. So just sort of walk us through how to value a dental practice.
Well, you're asking the the holy grail of all questions, because there are literally 100 ways to value a practice. Every CPA has a way to value it. You have many attorneys who evaluate it. The banks evaluate the practices differently. You have brokers. You have people who just do this professionally only. Give you a booklet of 50 pages with evaluation, and they charge you money for it. So that is the holy grail of metrics. It seems like nobody really has the right formula. The reality of it is it comes down to cash flow. That's the bottom line. What are people buying? I've got a dentist right now in Cleveland who's doing $1 million out of one office and $800,000 out of another. He's showing a minus $68 on one tax return and a minus $5,000 on another tax return. It's a true story. Unless we can show real cash flow, you cannot justify a strong value, no matter how good you think your practice is. And the more creative you get with your tax returns, actually, the worse it is. If you have someone coming in who's going to pay you an excellent value for your practice, you want to demonstrate that you have a lot of active patients and you have a very, very strong cash flow. If you can demonstrate that, you know, typically what you'll find is a multiple in the Midwest. East and West Coast are different. But you'll find a good range is 70 to 80% of your last 12 months collections. That's an average. That's a range. Some practices trade for lower, some for higher. But when I sit down with people, I can tell them very quickly, hey, listen, I'm not going to waste your time. You're not going to get what you're asking for. Let's be realistic.
Well, you
here.
of all people, you sort of know what the market will bear.
No question.
Yeah. So regardless of what independent valuation you come up with, you know what the market is going to pay for that business.
You know, like this specific dentist in Cleveland who's doing $1.8 million, he wants $1.8 million. I would love to get him $1.8 million. It'd be phenomenal. But there's no way we can do it because he's not showing any cash flow. And when I bring that up to him, he admits I'm a bad manager. I don't manage my business as well. I don't make a lot of money, but I produce a lot. Well, that's not a recipe for a very strong evaluation.
So that was my next question. How often do you go into a practice and you come up with a valuation and you say this is what the business is worth and the dentist disagrees with it?
You have to be realistic with a dentist. You have to be realistic because here's what happens. If you're unrealistic, you get into the acquiring of fees from attorneys and CPAs, and then you get to the 1 yard line, and then the buyer's bank will say, we're not doing this. You're going to reach a point in the transaction where it will fail ultimately. You know you're not going to cross the finish line if it's not realistic. So why even take them down that journey? I've found that I'm always able to keep the client and do business at a later time if I can help them understand where they are and how to get where they need to be to sell it. That seems to go farther when you can be that honest with people.
So now we've arrived at evaluation, and your job is to find a buyer of that practice. So you have a network that you've developed over years, thousands of dentists, literally. Could be somebody out of dental school. It could be private equity, which we'll talk about in a second. But actually, let's take the example. Let's say it's somebody out of school, okay? And that person doesn't obviously have the cash to buy that practice. So now we get into a situation where we need financing. So tell us how you arrange financing for a deal like this.
It was interesting before the market turnaround in 07, 08. You know, you could get a new graduate $1 million loan, really no out-of-pocket monies. I mean, it was
so 100% financing.
100%.
Yeah.
100%, no question.
Any bank.
Any bank. And I mean, you know, you could have some high-risk interest rates. You could have some interesting terms. They'd have spouse co-sign, or maybe, you know, their house is on lien on the house. But after the market turn, you found that the banks changed a little bit. So what they're looking for, if you have someone coming out of school, they typically will not do a very large loan, large meaning over $500,000. Without at least a year's worth of experience. They want 10% of cash in the bank that represents the amount they're going to borrow. They would like to see some production history, credit score over 700. So they've changed their metrics a little bit to have more of a low-risk buyer. And they typically want a dentist now that has more experience. So if you're coming right out of school...
So that makes it harder to have your own shop coming right out of school. You're working for somebody else now.
It is less and less common for someone coming out of school to borrow $500,000 to $1 million. Matter of fact, it's not that common anymore. If you want to hang a shingle and borrow a few $100,000, $300,000 or $400,000 for new equipment and hang a shingle, people still do that. But the reality of it is most new dentists are going out into the field, getting a few years of experience, and then they become financeable.
So let's talk about maybe not a new dentist, but somebody with some experience, like you said, somebody who has, you know, a history. And getting back to what we said before, you can obtain, it's not hard to obtain 100% financing to buy a practice. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Because why?
Because it's a funny thing. This is true. I had an executive at Bank of America tell me this, and I believe him. We were having dinner one night, and he said, Chris, the loan with the lowest default rate that we're aware of are burial plots. People just don't default on a loan for a burial plot. The second lowest default rate for any loan out there is dental. Remember when I said you could be the worst business manager and still cash flow to a point that you can pay your bills and the bank makes a nice return as well.
So the business is, as we sort of implied, it's almost recession-proof.
It's almost recession-proof. There are examples of people who fail. There are examples of people who are bad managers. But it is, as an industry-wide loan, it is one of the lowest default rates out there.
So a bank really has no problem lending the entire value of a practice.
No.
So now we've described this industry, which is almost recession-proof, which is, you said even marginal players can succeed. This sounds like the type of thing that outside money would start to get interested in after a while, and that's what's happening, right?
It's funny you're saying that. The landscape of dentistry is changing right in front of my eyes. It is a snowball. I saw it coming a couple of years ago when you could see a little bit of consolidation happening. You could see the Heartland Dental, which is now a $1.3 billion company. Great Expressions, Comfort Dental, Bright Now. All these different groups coming in and starting to consolidate, and now it's happening, it's picking up speed, and I have these companies that are several $100 million knocking on my door, and then I have a lot of regional players who want to become that big knocking on my door because they're backed by private equity. Private equity now has discovered the dental market and realized that return, that 3.5, 4, 5 multiple return they're looking for, is in the dental market. And so the consolidation is now happening at a rapid pace. It's interesting when I tell you that because what's happening is that is driving up values like I've never seen before.
Okay, so let me hit pause for a second. I have to do a short commercial break, but let's hold that thought. We'll come back in just a second. I just want to let you guys know, if you're interested in reading my stuff, a good starting point is the 10th Man newsletter published by Malden Economics, and it's absolutely free. Free as in it doesn't cost anything. You get my thoughts on the markets once a week, absolutely free. The name of the newsletter actually comes from World War Z, if you ever saw that. So to sign up, all you have to do is go to www.tenthman.us. That's www.tenthman.us. That's 10 as in number 10. It's a good introduction to how I think about markets, and there's plenty of funny stuff in there too. Just go to www.tenthman.us. So let's talk about this institutional money that's coming into the business and how it's driving up valuations. I mean, it's good for sellers, right? Like if somebody's wanting to sell their practice, this is the best possible time in the history of the business, right?
Again, when I started in this business 17 years ago, I would say the average practice sale, not what the collections were, but the sale, the average practice sale was $400,000 or $500,000, maybe $300,000 to $500,000. That was the average practice sale. Then obviously practices became there better software, better management, better equipment. Everything became more efficient, so practices started to grow, so the numbers were growing. Then the average practice sale was about $600,000. Then a few years ago, I would say the average practice sale was maybe closer to $800,000. With this private equity-backed groups coming in, they are offering multiples to dentists who have a very large cash flow or group practices that I've never seen before. Let me give you an example. Just last night, we were having a meeting with a dentist who collects about $5 million. He has 4 offices. And he's going to get $5 million. He's going to get a multiple of 1, maybe even a little bit higher.
So 1 times revenue.
One times revenue,
Yeah.
maybe even a little bit more because his cash flow is so good. And they like that because there's less risk with someone who has that common platform across 4 offices. You know, if he has an associate dentist quit, that may take a little dip, but it'll come right back up. Versus a solo practitioner, something happens to them, there's a high risk. So these dentists who have kind of a large group, a large presence, I'm seeing multiples of 1, even higher than 1 in this consolidation.
So let me ask you, maybe you don't know the answer to this question, but this phenomenon of private equity buying dental practices, is this just a Midwest phenomenon, or is this happening nationwide?
It's happening nationwide. I believe, this is just my theory, in 5 to 10 years, maybe a 10-year window, when dental students come out of school, they'll ask the following question: which corporation do I work for? Right now they can come out of school and they have options. Do I want to start a practice? Do I want to work for a year or 2 and buy a practice? In 10 years from now, the options will be, which large corporation do I work for?
So, I mean, in the past, dentistry was always a mom and pop shop sort of business. And what you're telling me is that those days are probably over, and you're going to be dealing with, you go to get your teeth cleaned, but you're dealing with sort of this big faceless corporation. Like that's what's going to be, that's the
And a lot
landscape.
of people don't even realize it. Many of the practices they go to have been purchased.
Yeah,
They've kept the mom and pop name on the door, but what they may not know is the software is different, the marketing's different. When you call in, it goes to a call center. It's happening right in front of our eyes, and it's happening so fast that I believe we have a 10-year window or less.
So do you think that, just asking your evaluation opinion, do you think that practices are getting overvalued, or do you think that valuations could continue higher? Are you advising dentists that they should sell now, or that maybe they should wait a couple years?
That's a great question. I'm advising my clients that I believe we're in a very unique position. The stars are aligned. I don't know if we're part of a bubble. Will that bubble burst? Because there's only so high that you can go. Now, does it mean, can it go higher? Yes, it can, but it will reach a threshold. Right now, we've reached multiples in the Midwest when you're getting at a multiple of 1 or 100% of collections, or even higher. I'm selling one for 110%, and that's unheard of. It's unheard of. How high will that go? What a private equity does, when they come in and they buy, or essentially they back these groups that buy these dental practices, think about this. let's say a dental practice has a cash flow of $200,000, and they pay a multiple of four or five for that. So they pay the dentist $800,000 or $1 million for his cash flow of $200,000. Well, on the open market, when that private equity goes to sell it, every dollar that they're bringing in is worth a multiple of 10 or 12. There was a large group in Texas that just sold for a multiple of 18.
Times cash flow?
Times cash flow.
Yeah, that's... So what are the consequences if these people end up paying too much for these dental practices?
Well, people are starting to ask that question, who's going to be left with the baton at the end? Again, I believe we're in a 5 or 10 year window, not only for the consolidation, but for the dentists who have a lot of cash flow, who have a large valuation, that they can get monies that they've never seen before. But I also believe it's a very healthy economy. The way these groups are coming in is they've learned through mistake and trial and error, at least some of them have. They pay top dollar for the practices, give the selling dentist great terms to keep them on, keep the goodwill there, treat them like a king, and they maintain and grow these practices. They don't have to shoot the moon and double these things. They don't have to triple them. All they have to do is just maintain. Because if you think about all...
Well, this is an income investment for...
Exactly.
Yeah, it's an income investment for them. So, but, like getting back to the earlier example of somebody coming out of school, these institutions have driven up the value of these practices. The ability to buy one and start on your own is just, they've got to be prohibitively expensive.
It's actually changed the way I market and the way I'm dealing with clients. I used to deal with new students all the time. I do all the graduating classes. I do seminars, go talk to the schools, and I still do some of that. But that approach now is different because we're literally outpricing the market for these new students. They can't afford that.
Yeah.
I mean, some of these kids are coming out of school with $300,000 or $400,000 in debt in the first place.
Yeah.
You add $1 million on top of that, and they haven't even seen a patient yet.
Yeah, they're an employee.
No question.
Yeah.
No question.
So the question everybody wants to know is, this is what happens. This is a big game of musical chairs. What happens if we get a recession, like a legitimate, honest to goodness, fairly severe recession? What happens?
I think if we see a recession, it will no doubt slow down the consolidation, but it will still continue. You may see, for example, in the Cleveland area, I can remember the average drop in the practices were 10 to 20% in the Cleveland area back in the 08-09. But guess what? They're back up above that threshold again. So will they weather the storm? They will. Will it slow down? Will the financing slow down? Will the acquisition slow down? I'm sure it will. But the nature of the game has changed.
Yeah, permanently.
Permanently.
Yeah. So let's talk about more of the personal aspect of this. There's a lot of stereotypes about dentists, that they're very eccentric people. They work, they cause pain to people all day. They work sort of cooped up in a building with a lot of women who don't like each other. They're very susceptible to scams.
A lot.
Everybody knows this, like penny stock scams, stuff like that. From my standpoint, they tend to be not very good investors. So sometimes, you're dealing with people who are kind of erratic. What's it like to be sort of the adult supervision?
Well, it's not only that, but I'm dealing with an erratic spouse. I'm dealing with an erratic CPA and attorney. The whole concept, the whole journey is erratic. And so, it's an amazing business.
Well, maybe not erratic, but maybe just not entirely rational. Like people are motivated by different things other than just getting, the most money for this practice.
Well, you sit down with a dentist and ask them what they want to accomplish. Mm-hmm. That's where it starts. And once you understand what his goals are, you try to make sure that the practice is a vehicle that will get him there. If it's not, you're honest with him. I cannot get you to your goal. You do not have the right ingredients yet to make that cake. But if you do, then you're honest with them. I believe here's what we can, the market will bear. I believe we can get you to this goal. Here's how we're going to do it. And you try to make sure that both of you are on the same page because you're about to have 100 different voices tell him how he's wrong and how he's right.
Yeah.
And my voice needs to be the voice he hears the most. I mean, I say this in jest. I have a lot of great friends, travel with them, just enjoy a lot of people. But, some of the clients I deal with, it's like the scientist from Back to the Future who developed the flux capacitor.
Doc Brown.
Doc Brown. You sit with Doc Brown and you just realize you've got a lot of work to do for him to understand how to get him across the finish line. And we get him there, but it takes a lot of work.
So, but you've told me earlier that oftentimes the hardest part of doing the deals is dealing with attorneys because they're compensated in a different way. You're compensated if the deal gets done. They get compensated no matter what, and oftentimes they have an interest in making sure it doesn't get done.
There are some very good attorneys and CPAs in the market who are very good at what they do, and then there are a lot who have no idea what the dental world is and think it's a real estate transaction or some kind of commercial business transaction. And the reality of it is that they confuse and scare their client. And so you have to be very careful that you're working with people who are very experienced in the business, or someone can encourage you never to make a decision, and in the end, you've lost out on 7 figures. So you have to be very careful who your advisors are. So I'm always willing to work with any advisor they have, but there's a big difference in your golfing buddy who's never done a dental transition and the attorney who's done 100 of them. There's a huge difference.
Yeah. So we have time for maybe some of your greatest hits. I mean, I'm sure you have some stories built up over the years. Just some of the crazy stuff that you've seen. You've told me some of it.
I've got one of my most successful clients. It's kind of a backwards story, but I remember getting a phone call to visit a practice, and I do that. I go visit every office. You need to build that relationship. But I remember when I pulled up to the front of the office, I had to walk up 40 flights of stairs, and I thought, this is not good. What if someone has surgery? What if someone's sedated? This is not a good venue for large procedures, walking up or down 40 flights of stairs. So I get up there, and there's this sweet gentleman, an 80-year-old guy, and his 85-year-old wife is behind the front desk. And they believe that their practice is sitting on a pile of gold. And I remember just the sweetest couple telling him, I'm sorry, I cannot help you. I cannot spin this in a way to somebody that this is a great deal. And I remember giving him tips on how to sell his practice and how to market and do whatever he could that it would be beneficial to him, and I left. And I get a call about 6 months later from this young kid, graduated from dental school. And he says, Chris, I've got your name from a friend. I hear you're good at what you do. I need your help. I'm about to close my doors and go out of business. Well, Mark, tell me about your business. Well, I bought this practice. Well, tell me about it. Well, you walk up this long flight of stairs.
Oh, no.
And I said, wait a minute. Do you get to the top, turn left, and you have 2 operatories, and you have this view overlooking this park? He goes, yeah, how did you know? And I said, who in the world gave you the advice to buy that practice? And he goes, well, it was cheap. And that's the mentality of a young dentist. I've starved in dental school. I've taken out all these loans. I'm going to get out and buy the cheapest thing possible. Well, this kid, because he bought cheap, he was about to close his doors. There really were no patients. So we sat down and we analyzed what he needs to do to build his business.
Just because the location was bad, right? Like,
it was a terrible location. And then, the age of the patients were probably all 75 and 80 years old as well.
Yeah.
So we really didn't have a healthy patient base. So we devised a plan to buy a practice close by and merge it in to gain him strength. In the meantime, I give him credit. He went out and had a tooth costume designed. And he called himself Molar Man. And he looked like the Kool-Aid Man, except it was a tooth. And I give him credit.
Kool-Aid.
And he went to all the local elementary schools and skipped and hopped and danced and was Molar Man and passed out toothbrush. And every kid in the community wanted to go see Molar Man. So fast forward 10 years later, he's very, very successful, has multiple offices, 7-figure income. He could retire right now. He's a fairly young man. But he was this close of going under because of bad advice, thinking cheap, and not really doing his homework on how to buy a practice.
It's actually, I just want to ask a tangential question to that story. So you said that his patient base, first of all, he didn't have a lot of patients, but the patient base was old and bad. So is that something, if someone's going to do a deal, do you analyze the composition of who the patients are? And
we certainly do. We do an active patient count. You can actually run reports that tell you the age demographics. You can do a census and tell you what zip codes they're from, how many times they've been in the practice over the last 12 and 24 months. You can really now get a great perspective of how healthy a practice is.
Yeah.
Versus just guessing.
Let's get on to the fun stuff. Do a little speed round. As you know, with every guest, we do speed round. And I think I have some good stuff lined up for you here. So I'm going to ask you 2 choices, A or B. You have to pick one.
Hamburger A or hamburger B.
Yeah. Okay, you ready?
Ready.
Carnitas or barbacoa?
Barbacoa.
Really?
My son loves barbacoa, so barbacoa.
I'm a carnitas guy.
Are you?
And they load you at the Chipotle over by the mall. They load you up with carnitas. It's like a pound of pork. It's really good.
You know, I'm not going to argue either one. I'd just say barbacoa.
Finaflex or Yeah Buddy?
Yeah, buddy, all the way.
I'm slightly disappointed. I took a full scoop, and I definitely got some tingling, but I think the Finaflex is actually, I mean, Yeah Buddy has the better name, but I think the Finaflex is actually a little more potent.
You know, I'm thrilled that you found something that works for you. I'm going to say no comment on either one, but Yeah Buddy.
What do you mean no comment on either one? What's there to be
sound like a
afraid
drug
about?
dealer, like I'm pushing powder on you.
Okay, what is the best Christopher Nolan movie?
You know, it's got to be Dark Knight Rises.
That's a very good choice.
That's outstanding.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's like a 3-way tie between Interstellar and Inception and Dark Knight Rises.
The Inception or Dark Knight Rises for me.
Yeah, Interstellar is kind of its own animal. Yeah. I mean, when I went to see Dark Knight Rises in the theater, I was like, holy cow. And it was in 2012, so it was the year after Occupy Wall Street, so that was on everybody's mind, and it's a very relevant movie. It was very good.
No, it's fantastic.
What is the best Adam Sandler movie?
Happy Gilmore, for sure.
Yeah, right?
I mean, it's funny from beginning to end. I mean, listen, if you're going to waste 2 hours of your life, you want to laugh out loud. That's it.
It never stopped being funny.
No.
It's still funny.
No, it's hilarious.
Yeah.
It's a classic.
Charmed or Who's the Boss?
Who's the Boss?
I used to turn on, this is 10 years ago, I used to turn on Charmed and just turn off the volume.
I don't think anything's changed.
So your 2 boys are big swimmers. So who is better, Michael Phelps or Katie Ledecky?
Well, Katie Ledecky has been compared as the female Michael Phelps because she's breaking world records, and now that she's in college at Stanford, she's doing things that are that could even compete against and outdo the men. She's really a phenom. So I would consider him equal.
Equal?
Yeah, I would consider him equal because if they would allow her to race against the men, she would be even faster. There's just nobody that can touch her. When she wins, she's 2 or 3 pool lengths ahead of everybody.
Pool lengths?
Pool lengths, literally.
Yeah.
And it's an amazing thing to watch. So I would say Phelps has the history, but you'll see Ledecky catch up on the gold medals.
Yeah. Metamucil or colon cleanse?
Colon cleanse. Super.
Now, for the benefit of everybody listening, colon cleanse it's like Metamucil except on steroids.
You can actually go to Vitamin Shop and buy Super Colon
Well,
Cleanse.
that was my next question. And I don't want to try a super colon cleanse.
Mix that with your Phenaflex.
With some Viagra. Well, that was my last one because I was going to ask you about super colon cleanse. So you ruined one of my questions. Okay, so let's tell people where to find you. What is your website?
Transition1.net. You can find a biography about me, a write-up. You'll see a lot of testimonials. But here's the reality of it. Most of the business I do is definitely word of mouth. Many of the large clients I work with call me because they know me. And here's the second fact that's very, very important. A good practice will never get listed on the internet. It's always one that I know who to call.
It's a broker's market. It's not like buying a house. It's going to be on Zillow. There's no Zillow for dental practices.
If you have a $4 or $5 million office and you call me, I know who the 2 or 3 buyers will be. Instead of you wasting all your time on trying to parade 10 or 20 people through, I can filter that down to the 1, 2, or 3 who not only can buy it, but want to buy it. And that'll never make the internet.
Yeah.
That's just the market.
So transition1.net.
Transition1.net. You can find my contact information and any information you need to get a hold of me.
That's great. Thanks for being on the show. This concludes the 5th episode of the Monthly Dirtcast. Thanks to our guest, Chris Vandiford. Thanks to Blake Gerald for letting me use his track Punta del Este. And if you want to learn more about the Daily Dirt Nap,